Good morning, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I have to apologize. We missed a week last week. I was actually traveling and thought I was going to be able to get it done, and it didn't happen. And so anyway, I just thought, well, time to just move on and do the next week. So I'm going to start out with the stats like I always do. And the stats are really, I did look at what happened last week as well as what's going on this week. And they really are not too much different. It's very predictable in regards to where we're at. The single family homes was 400 for the week, and that's what it was the week before. The median price is at 435. It was at 433 the week before, so very consistent in regards to where we were at. Now, I know a lot of times people are saying, hey, I want some distress sales and what's going on out there. There were actually 3 foreclosed homes that were sold and no short sales. So what that means, for the most part, a lot of people out there have a lot of equity. And so what that means is that, if you're in trouble or you think you're underwater or something like that and behind in your payments, you can probably sell your home regularly and still, solve it and not have to go to foreclosure. So I really think it's important for people to at least look at that and see what the scoop is for them and their family in doing all of that. Basically, if we can avoid foreclosure or a short sale on your record, then that's great. There are times where it can't happen, and so that's why those foreclosure and short sale options are out there, and bankruptcy and all of that kind of good stuff as well, that if you're just in a situation where you can't do anything about it, then that's your option. But basically, when it comes down to it, for many people, there are options. And so with our cash offers program, for example, you can get cash offers on your home right now, and can probably take you out of whatever situation that you're in. Now, they are a little bit more tricky today than they were a few years ago, because the inventory is so strong that, if you do have equity, it makes it a lot easier in getting a good cash offer versus something that's kind of mediocre. But basically, of those 400 homes that sold last week, 26 of them were under 250, 33 between 250 and 300, 95 between 3 and 400, 89 between 400 and 500, 128 between 500 and a million, and 29 over a million. So when we're looking at our inventory, we're at 5.2, which is right in the middle of 4 to 6, which is considered a normal market. So that's where we're at. When we're under 250, we've got 5.49 months of inventory. 250 to 300, we're at 3.77. Then we're in the 4s up to 500. 5.77, 500 to a million, and then 7 months of inventory over a million is basically what we're coming from. So then you would think, okay, so that must mean that we get a lot of negotiating power when it comes to the list price to the actual price that you paid. And where we're at is 96.58 overall. Under 250 is at 93.03, 94.34 if it's over a million, and then all the rest of them are in the 96s. It's 98 actually between 300 and 400, and 97.97 400 to 500. So, there's really not as much room to negotiate as you much think, but perhaps you can get closing costs and that kind of stuff if you're a buyer, but that's also, what to know as a seller as well. The average days to a contract is 67, basically overall, and kind of, pretty close across the board. 500 to a million is at 81, and over a million was at 70, but pretty close when it comes to that. So now when we're looking at condos, townhomes, and villas, there were 89 last week, and the price is at 245, which is down 9.9% from the week before. So that was at about 275. But, the way I look at it is that this is only 1 week's worth of what's going on. So we're looking for trends is basically what we're looking for. So this week, a little bit lower volume sold, little bit lower number of at the price it sold at 245, but 245 versus 435 for a condo versus versus a home is basically kind of where we're at. So when I'm looking at the breakdown then of the condos, townhomes, and villas, of those 89 that sold, 45 of them were under 250. 12 between 250 and 300, 21 between 300 and 400, 7 between 400 and 500, 4 between 500 and a million, and none of them over a million sold. There's 17 on the market. But the average, the months of inventory is at 11.4 for the condos, townhomes, and villas. Now it's at 9 under 250 because there were more that sold this week than normal in that price range. But it's 12 months, 17 months between 400 and 500, 18 months between 500 and a million. And, basically when it comes down to it, I think that you really need to be looking at what are you going to be able to do with that when it comes down to it, and figure out, there's a little bit of room. So basically, when you're looking at, then the thing that we wanted to look at obviously was the list to ask price ratio, which is hanging right there, the same as the single family homes at 96.69. So not a big difference there. The average days on the market is at 79, so a little bit higher. But when it comes to a condo, townhome, and villa, it really comes down to really marketing it well, making sure that you've got it standing out, because when you've got that much inventory, it's definitely a buyer's market when it comes to that kind of property. And so you have to be aggressive about it. Basically, when it comes down to it, you first of all have to be realistic in regards to the price and what your expectations are for that and what you're expecting it to do. And so that's one big thing that you need to know. The second thing is that you, if you're a seller of that, you definitely have to stand out. I was talking to a guy earlier this week, and he was telling me that he had a condo that's got some room in it if somebody wants to flip it. And so he sent me all the information on it. And when I saw it initially, I knew that development. And I said, well, I know a few years ago there was a major lawsuit there against the developer, and, what's going on with all of that. And he had told me, he said, well, it's all in the note, it's all disclosed and everything, but it's still going on for 18 months. And so, that's something that when you come to that particular development, that you're going to want to negotiate that down or that into the purchase price or whatever, to make sure that, you're not stuck with that. I mean, it was something that I remember to the tune of $40,000 or $50,000 that was going to be required from each one of the owners of that particular condo. And so it made it, quite, it was quite a shock to the people that lived there, and, the people that were owning that property in regards to what they had to do. And it was all because of deferred maintenance, on the project. And so as a result of the new condo rules and that kind of stuff, that was kind of when all that stuff was fleshed out a few years ago. And so now it's kind of calming down. So I do expect the condo market to get better once all of this stuff is fleshed out. But because what has been fleshed out, it's kind of one of those situations where it's a tough situation for current condo owners, and they're going to have to bite the bullet. But once it's passed, then the condos should start to increase again. The condo fees should potentially, steady at least and probably go down. And so, all of that stuff is kind of going on. So the condo market is different than the housing market. And so you just have to be aware of that when you're looking at it. I mean, it's a couple 100,000 difference between the median price of the condo and the median price of a single family home. So when you're looking at it that way, there's obviously a lot of room and everything, but when it comes down to it, you need to definitely know what you're doing, what you're looking at, and what you want to do in the future. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555 or find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So it was interesting. I was looking at some articles like I always do to figure out what to talk about on this particular podcast show. And one of the things that I found that I thought was interesting is that people really wanted to have good neighbors. And I think that that is absolutely critical when it comes down to it. And one of the odd things that I found is it said that 4 out of 5 people have spent $1,000 at least on something with their neighbor, like some kind of beef or something like that, which I found that odd. But I'm sure it happens and seems kind of high in the number in regards to doing that. And so I'm thankful that the neighborhood that I live in, that we don't have that kind of situation, or I haven't had that kind of situation with my neighbors, and everybody's friendly. I was just talking to my neighbor last night in regards to, just kind of what's going on in the neighborhood and all of that kind of good stuff. So it's basically comes down to that, that in my opinion, it's great to have good neighbors, that they watch out for each other. I know that, it's like I don't know everybody down the block, but I do know the neighbors that are surrounding me and all of that kind of good stuff. And we always stop and wave and talk to each other and all of that kind of good stuff, which usually when you do that kind of thing, you don't get into the legal ends of it. Usually you can work things out. But it says that, that's one of the number one things that people are looking for, is that they want to make sure that the neighborhood is what they want it to be. And I know that, I was working this week with one buyer, and basically, they actually are looking at new construction, and in the rules for this particular neighborhood, it says that you can't keep boats in the front yard, which is pretty typical of most homeowners associations and everything. And this is a relatively new community, and it is on a lake. And basically, it makes sense. And so anyway, there are a couple of houses in the neighborhood that for the last 2 months that we've observed that they do have boats in the front yard, and they're not looking, it's not, they're not like one of them was, kind of catty corner over the sidewalk. And then they've got like this whole pile of other things that's probably like 6 feet by 8 feet that's covered up with a plastic covering and that kind of stuff. And I don't know what's underneath it, but basically, it's stuff that you wouldn't expect that a homeowners association would allow. So we went to the builder and said, hey, we have concerns about this because you're asking us in buying a new property that we would sign these documents saying that we're not going to do this stuff. And then here's this new community that only has probably so far about, maybe 40 or 50 homes in it. And you're allowing these homes to do that. So that's not really looking like you're going to be holding people accountable to what the rules are that you've got out there. And so, and this person that's purchasing it right now lives in a neighborhood that's in a homeowners association that's very strict, that's very tight, that everything is kept very, on the up and up and all of that kind of stuff. And that's exactly what they were expecting from this new neighborhood. And so they've kind of said, hey, if this doesn't change, we don't want to move in this neighborhood. And it makes sense, right? And so we're kind of going through that battle and everything with it now. And at first, when I was talking to the builder about it, they're like, oh, don't have to worry about it or anything like that. And now I finally found somebody that's like, yeah, this is totally unacceptable. This just doesn't make sense. This isn't the way that it's supposed to be. And there's actually two builders that are building in that community. The lesser builder is the one that I'm talking to, meaning that they have less lots, not that they're a lesser builder, but they have less lots than the other builder does. And so the builder with the more lots is the one that's currently in charge of the HOA. So, at first they said, well, you need to go to that builder. And I'm like, okay, we don't own any property in here. And we're not buying from them. So why would they particularly listen to us? They're not going to listen to us for anything. So anyway, they finally agreed and they said, okay, we're the ones that have to go after that. And I'm like, yes, absolutely you do. So they're going after the builder on that and saying, hey, we need to really look at this. So the point comes down to, really when you're looking at a property, you do need to consider the neighborhood. And I know that there's many times when I'm out there with a buyer and they're just like, okay, we are not even going to go inside the house that we had planned to because we don't like the neighborhood. And, maybe it's that the grass isn't cut by somebody or, there's just a lot of stuff laying around or whatever. And I know that makes a difference. I know there was a house that I was selling a couple of years ago that was under contract. And, it was at the time where we had multiple offers. And this was, we had taken a cash offer, and it comes to find out that the actual one of the buyers that was buying it did not come to the property to look at it. And when they did come, there was a neighbor that just liked to sit outside. They were retired and that's what they like to do is they like to sit outside. Well, that just totally turned off this particular buyer. And so when they came for the inspection, they said, no, we're not going to do it. I mean, we ended up selling the house for more money in about 3 days. So it really wasn't a problem. But basically, when the bottom line is that, neighborhoods do make a difference. And I know I was working with a family about a year ago, and the neighbor across the street, I mean, they were a little bit older and all of that kind of stuff. And so their yard was not as pristine as it might have been. And so, one of the things that we discussed is we're like, hey, do you think that you could talk to your neighbor about them cutting the grass or, even helping them with it and that kind of stuff? And so, it ended up that they didn't end up doing that and the house sold lickety split anyway, but it was something that was of a concern of mine when you're looking at it. So, I think it just helps to be good neighbors. And for example, one of my neighbors, they, were traveling this summer for a couple of weeks. I think they were gone like 3 weeks, and they cut their own grass. And so as a result of it, it wasn't looking very good when they got home. And so I had reached out. I knew their sister, and so I did reach out to them. I'm like, hey, when's your brother coming home? Do you want me to go ahead and cut the grass for him and stuff like that? Just because, just being a good neighbor and all of that kind of good stuff. It's not necessarily the norm and everything for that neighbor, but basically when they were out of town and left in a hurry and forgot that, about the grass, and maybe we should have somebody do it when we're gone. So you're going to have those kinds of situations that are normal that are going to pop up. But, just the look and feel of the neighborhood. And we always suggest that you go maybe a couple of times during the day, different days, and that kind of stuff to get the feel for it. And then you're going to actually know if that's a neighborhood that you want to move into. And basically, when it comes down to it, for some people it's really important and others it's not. So if it is important for you, then I think it's something that you definitely need to do and check out, because it's better to be safe than sorry and dealing with it later. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I thought I would just go through a little bit of a few of the things that you need to think about when you're buying a home and all of that kind of stuff. And, one of the things that might be a little bit new for people today that this is something that I've been using for years, but it's something that's relatively new for a lot of people, and that's a written buyer's agreement. And you might think, well, why in the world is that even necessary, or what do I have to do, or why do I have to do it? And basically, what has evolved in the real estate industry is that this is common practice and something that should be done. And basically, the reason that it's become common practice is that, first of all, what happened several years ago is that there were some lawsuits that were done over the years and just recently were settled, that sellers were kind of told, hey, you're going to pay the buyer's agent commission. And when you think about it, if you were suing somebody and or somebody was suing you and everything, and then it was like, hey, we want you to pay our attorney fee, the other sides. And that really doesn't make sense, because actually the agent that's working with the buyer, for the most part, is somebody that's going to try to get a better deal off of you. And so why should you be paying somebody to try to get you down on price or get some terms that you really weren't happy with or anything like that? And so you want to have somebody, you want to pay for your representation and have them pay for their representation, is basically what it comes down to. Now, in this particular market, it's not required for a seller to pay for a buyer's agent or pay anything towards a buyer's agent. But basically, when it comes down to it, in this particular market where it's turning into a buyer's market and it's kind of even now, it makes sense to do that so that you're, so that it's easier. It's not published as it was before, but what you do find is that there are times where people will call and say, hey, is the seller offering compensation? And if they're not offering compensation, sometimes they'll say, okay, well, I'm not going to show the house. And so basically, in this kind of market where you need your house to stand out, it is something that you might want to at least consider. So I was meeting with a seller yesterday, and basically what we discussed, hey, I'm going to consider that you're going to be paying the buyer's agent X percent in our net sheet and figuring out what it is. We might not have to do that, but when it comes down to it, I'd rather be conservative and realistic in regards to what we're going to do now, as opposed to, when it comes up and then, hey, here's an extra, big fee that you weren't counting on, that you thought that money was going in your pocket. And in order to make the deal happen, this is what we have to do. So whether it's going to go to a buyer's agent or maybe seller concessions or something like that, I wanted to add it in so that we were prepared for it. And if we end up better, then that's great. But basically, depending on the market, like if the market is as it was where we had a half a month's inventory 3 or 4 years ago, then basically the bottom line is, there is no buyer compensation to the agent that needs to be made. There was no seller concessions. There was no nothing that was required at that point in time. It was just plain and simple. Hey, if you want to get this house, this is what it's going to cost. No appraisal contingency, no nothing. It's just kind of, this is it. And there's 15 other people, 20 other people that'll take this house right now if that's not what you want to do. And so basically, what it depends on the market on whether or not you're going to pay a buyer's agent. So as a buyer, you need to make sure that that it's upfront, that you know what your buyer's agent is expecting and what the compensation and all of that kind of thing is. Now, what I do is I sit down with the buyer and we go through what our process is, what our system is, and what the value is in working with us. And as a result of that, this is our fee and, how we're going to accomplish getting that and all of that kind of good stuff. So as a buyer, everything is up front and basically what's going on. So whether you're a seller and going to be paying that buyer's agent, or whether you're a buyer and might have to pay your agent as well. And a lot of times people think, well, I'm just going to go to the listing agent and I'm not going to have to, pay that fee. That's not necessarily true. They're probably still going to have you sign a buyer's agreement, number one. And number two, it's already negotiated in possibly with their contract, just like I did with these people, that, what we're willing to pay at this particular moment, but it's always negotiable. So, it's always interesting to me that you think that you would go to a listing agent and that they're going to get you a better deal because they're really, depending on what their contract is, many times their fiduciary responsibility is to the seller. And so they're going to, actually make sure that you're paying the most that you could potentially pay, for that particular house, as opposed to working with a buyer's agent that's going to be working for you to pay less. And so, basically, when it comes down to it, I think you really need to be careful in regards to making sure who's representing you and what you're doing. And basically, I know today the MLS has been made public for all intents and purposes, that you can find it on multitude of websites, including like realtor.com and Zillow and all of those kinds of places. But there are, but the best deals are still a lot of the off-market properties, the properties that aren't on the market. And so, that's what I work with a lot of my buyers on, because, the houses that are out there and all of that kind of good stuff. And I know some houses right now that are not on the market that are available, but they're it's like I was talking to one of my clients and he's like, hey, if you have a buyer and you want to bring them to me, that's great. But I don't want to put the house on the market because I don't want the days on the market to be sitting there and people, judging my house based on the days on the market. And they do that. And it doesn't make sense because, when you're looking at any other thing out there, like if you were going to, Macy's, for example, and looking at a particular outfit or something like that, does it say on it, like, this has been sitting on the store's floor for 2 months or 3 months or anything like that? No, absolutely not. But for some reasons, they want to tell you that a house has been sitting there for that amount of time. Well, basically it comes down to, if you're starting to look today, you're thankful that those houses are sitting out there and they're available and everything now, and they've been waiting for you potentially, or, maybe it's an off-market property that we're going to find for you. But basically, nobody else chose it because it was waiting for you. If it hadn't been there on the market, then, you might not have known about it and you might not have been looking for it. So the days on market is a big pet peeve that I have when it comes to something that people look at. Sometimes maybe it makes a difference, but most of the time it doesn't. And so as a result of that, it just causes kind of a bad situation for people in regards to what they're looking at and what they're looking for. And as a result of that, it's just it's not a good thing. I don't see any benefit of days on the market. The only thing that it does is it tells a buyer sometimes that they think that they can get a better price. And maybe they can, and maybe they can't. And maybe they could have before, and maybe they couldn't have before. But basically, it's just data. And it causes people to make decisions that aren't good for anybody. And so that's why I really struggle with days on the market. I live with it because it's out there and what you've got to do, but it isn't anything that I'm excited about. And I don't think as a buyer or seller, it's something that you should necessarily look at. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at Central Florida Real Estate Radio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So one caveat that I want to make of what I was, I don't know if caveat's the right word, but the one distinction that I want to make from what I was talking about before, that I was saying that days on the market that, as a buyer or seller, that you really shouldn't pay as much attention to it as everybody does, because it doesn't make a difference. Now, that doesn't mean that I am not concerned about it when I'm working with the seller, and that I am working diligently to keep that number as low as possible. And when you look at the stats, our numbers are significantly less than the average realtor when it comes to our days on the market and that kind of thing. And there are things that definitely cause people to have different days on the market and all of that kind of good stuff. Sometimes, a lot of times people will say, hey, just try my house at this price, which is a really, really bad idea in this market. And the reason is because, basically with the number of houses that are out there right now, there's over, I think it was 5 months of inventory for the single family homes. There's 11 months of inventory of condos. Okay. So when you're looking at that, if there's 11 months of inventory on a condo and you're going to price your property higher, guess what? They've got a boatload of properties to look at that are at a less price, that are at market price, that are going to get the look at before you. You're never even going to get it looked at that price. And that's the same thing for the single family homes at 5 months of inventory. If they have, if they have 5 other choices that are a lot less than your house, and it's the same size, it's the same floor plan, it's the same that, they're just going to say, well, I don't have time. I don't want to go look at that. And so as a result of that, they're not going to look at it. We have a whole pricing strategy that we've put together with all of the bells and whistles in regards to the studies and everything of what has been shown and done and how to get more for your house and everything when it comes down to it. And basically, it does come down to pricing. I mean, our metrics are that we want to have 10 showings in 10 days. If we're not having 10 showings in 10 days, then we know something is wrong with the price because of all of the marketing and all of the things that we're doing. And so, when it comes to selling your house, do you want to do it like a Band-Aid that you're going to rip it right off? And it's going to be over? Or do you want to, just like take it a little bit at a time, and you're going to be going on for months and months and months, and then maybe not sell your house, and then somebody's going to look at it and go, well, how come this house has been on the market for 4 months and everything? And the reason is because you didn't price it properly to begin with. And so you've got to be quick to make those decisions and change things when it's out there. And, you can say, well, maybe it's not the right time. Okay, there were 400 houses that sold last week in the Orlando market. just in 1 week in the houses in the Orlando market. So houses are selling. That's the good news. They're selling. Condos are selling too, about 111, I think it was, on the condos. So they're selling. So basically it comes down to that if your property isn't selling, what's going on with it that it is. And 9 times out of 10, it's, well, through our systems, it's the price, because we know that we're marketing. We're not just putting it on the MLS and hoping something happens. We've got 16 systems that go into effect within 72 hours of somebody putting their house on the market. And as a result of that, we are making things happen. And so that's why we can sell them faster and for more money and all of that kind of good stuff. And, I was talking to this one seller that she definitely has decided that she wants to sell. And she originally went to the cash offers and they rescinded their offers because there were 100 houses within a half a mile of her house that are on the market. Okay, basically, you've got to do something different to stand out from those 100 houses that are within a half a mile of you. And so as a result of that, it's like we have a plan. We're going to put it into place and her house will be sold within a week. And I know it as well as anything in regards to how to make that happen. And it all comes down to how we're going to price it, how we're going to market it, and all of that kind of stuff. So there are options and there are things that you can do. Is it conventional? Not necessarily. Is it hard work? Absolutely. But does it get the results? Absolutely. And I think that that's what you're looking for, is that you want to make sure that as a seller, that you've got everything going on that you can have going on. I was on a conference call earlier this week, and basically, when it came down to it and all of that kind of good stuff, that they were saying, they were like, as a real estate agent, what can you do when it comes to selling a house? I mean, how can you sell 100% of the houses that you put on the market? And the only way for you to do that is if you are in control of the price. And basically, when it comes down to it, it's like many times sellers don't really want to sell that much. I was looking at a particular neighborhood a month ago, and then I met with the sellers again. Now they're ready to go. And basically, they're like, well, what happened to this house that was on the market in our neighborhood a month ago? And I'm like, well, they took it off the market because they weren't getting their price. They expected a certain amount to get for it. They weren't getting it, so they decided not to sell. And, that's okay that you can do that. I mean, as a seller, you have that option. But basically, if you do need to sell, if you do want to sell, you do have to be price conscious, especially in this market. And so the people that I was talking to, where we looked at it a month ago, we looked at that their house was going to sell for about $400,000. I said, honestly, it's going to be at $390. And basically, so they agreed, and everything in what we had looked at, the competition of what's on the market now, of what actually properties have sold for in their neighborhood. And they're all the same floor plan. They were all built like 3 or 4 years ago. So basically, there's not a lot of differences. Not a lot of people haven't done any upgrades. They haven't put new roofs on. They haven't had to. They're still all fairly new. So basically, when it comes down to it, now these people paid in the neighborhood of right around $320. So they still have a huge gain and everything on the house. So they're not losing money on the property, but basically when you're looking at it and you're going to let their house sell versus every other option that people have out there, you want to make sure that you've got your best foot forward. So I spent a lot of time kind of talking on that this morning. I hope it helps you in regards to what you're doing and knowing that, if you do have a goal and you really want to sell, you definitely have to look at reality when it comes to pricing, and then make sure that you're going with the right person, that not just putting it on the MLS, that you're doing those 16 extra steps to make sure that that house is going to get sold. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407 877-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.